My name is Wayne Beaton, and I'm the Director of Open Source Projects here at the Eclipse Foundation. In this video, I'm going to talk about working with Git. I'm not going to talk about how to use Git. There are plenty of resources available elsewhere for that. Rather, in this video, I will discuss how Eclipse open source projects, and more specifically, Eclipse open source project committers use Git. Source is what we refer to as core content. Core content is project-related content that is fundamental or core to the project. By source, we typically mean source code, but this notion extends to all of the various source artifacts that are fundamental to the project. This includes test code and documentation, as well as diagrams, specifications, and other sorts of artifacts that contribute to the project's deliverables. Eclipse projects must use the infrastructure provided by the Eclipse Foundation for all core content. I'll reinforce that both documentation and test code are core content. That is, project source, documentation, and test code must all be maintained in a repository that is provided to the project team by the Eclipse Foundation. The general idea is to ensure that we establish and maintain a level playing field where all committers play by the same set of rules and all contributors have the same opportunity to access and contribute to the open source project's development branches. The Eclipse Foundation owns and maintains the official Git repositories for all Git open source projects on behalf of the project and the community. Committers must regularly push their commits to official repositories. When developers push their content directly and frequently into the official repository so that the entire community has access to the most up-to-date form of the project content, members of that community have the ability to keep up with project development and an even opportunity to contribute. Put another way, when a project team works in private and then periodically synchronizes their internal repository with a public one, it is basically impossible for anyone outside of the private team to contribute any content. That is, committers must, as a matter of practice, specifically not stage their commits internally before pushing them to the public repository. Contributors must have signed the Eclipse Contributor Agreement. The Eclipse Foundation's IT team installs hooks onto all of our Git repositories that will validate this for you. The email address of the author must match the email address associated with the author's Eclipse Foundation account. Note that you can specify additional authors using also by fields in the footer of a commit message. You can include multiple separate also by fields, one for each author. The field is formatted in the same manner as the author. Also by authors are not checked by for valid ECAs. You cannot accept anonymous contributions. Commits need to have a real email address in the author field, and that real email address must map to a real Eclipse Foundation account. Contributions must be provided to the project by the author or copyright holder directly to the repository. That is, contributions must be received as merge requests on the Eclipse Foundation's GitLab instance, pull requests on a GitHub repository, or as a review request on the Eclipse Foundation's Gerrit instance. Any other means of receiving a contribution is considered extraordinary, and you should check with the IP team to determine the right course of action. The purpose of the Eclipse Contributor Agreement, the ECA, is to provide a written record that contributors have agreed to provide their contributions of code and documentation under the licenses used by the Eclipse projects they are contributing to. It also makes clear that contributors are promising that what they are contributing to Eclipse is code that they wrote and that they have the necessary rights to contribute it to Eclipse projects. And finally, it documents a commitment from the contributor that their open source contributions will be permanently on the public record. All contributors who are not committers on the Eclipse project must sign the Eclipse Contributor Agreement. Eclipse committers do not need to sign the ECA. Contributions received from Eclipse committers are covered by their committer agreement. That is, if you have either signed the individual committer agreement or are covered by a member committer and contributor agreement, you do not need an ECA to contribute. It's not wrong to sign the ECA if you're already covered by a committer agreement. It's just not necessary. The Eclipse Foundation maintains an instance of GitLab for use by Eclipse open source projects at gitlab.eclipse.org. Project teams may opt to host some or all of their canonical source repositories on our GitLab instance. Any committer can file an issue in the Eclipse Help Desk to request that the Eclipse IT team create a new repository on or move an existing repository to the GitLab instance for their project. Note that the IT team will verify the request with the project leads. GitLab organizes content into a series of nested groups with Eclipse at the root. Each project gets a subgroup that's identified using the project's short name. In this example, the Eclipse Dash project, which has a short name of Dash, has a GitLab group at eclipse/dash and repositories named Handbook and License Tool. 3 teams are created for each GitLab group based on the corresponding project team's composition. All project leads are automatically added to the project leads team, which is granted the maintainer role on their project's GitLab repositories. When an individual is elected into the role of project lead, they are automatically added to the project leads team. Likewise, when a project lead is retired, they are automatically removed from the team. All committers are automatically added to the committers team and are granted the developer role on their project resources hosted on GitLab. When an individual is elected into the role of committer, they are automatically added to the committers team. Likewise, when a committer is retired, they are automatically removed from the team. All designated contributors are automatically added to the contributors team and are granted reporter level access to project resources hosted on GitLab. When an individual is added to the project's contributors list, they are automatically added to the contributors team. When they are removed from the contributors list, they are automatically removed from the team. I'll speak a little bit more about designated contributors in a minute. For information regarding the privileges available to each of the maintainer, developer, and reporter roles, please consult the GitLab documentation. All contributors, that is, anybody who is not an Eclipse committer, must sign the Eclipse Contributor Agreement. The Eclipse Foundation installs a hook on Git repositories that will reject pushing or merging any commits with an author who is not covered by the Eclipse Contributor Agreement. With GitLab, the merge button will appear for committers on merge requests, but attempting the merge will fail if any of the commits in the merge request have authors who are not covered by the ECA. When troubleshooting merge failures, be sure to confirm that every committer of every commit in the merge request is covered by an ECA. Project teams may host some or all of their repositories on GitHub. Any committer can file an issue in the Eclipse Help Desk to request that the Eclipse IT team create a new repository on or move an existing repository to GitHub. Note that the IT team will verify the request with the project leads. Project teams can opt to put their repositories into the Eclipse GitHub organization or can create their own. Project organizations take the form of Eclipse followed by a dash and the project's short name. In this example, the Eclipse Dash project, which has a short name of Dash, has a GitHub organization at Eclipse Dash Dash with repositories named Handbook and License Tool. 3 teams are created for each GitHub group based on the corresponding project team's composition. All project leads are automatically added to the project leads team, which is granted the maintain role on their project's GitHub repositories. When an individual is elected into the role of project lead, they are automatically added to the project leads team. Likewise, when a project lead is retired, they are automatically removed from the team. All committers are automatically added to the committers team and are granted the write role on their project resources hosted on GitHub. When an individual is elected into the role of committer, they are automatically added to the committers team. When a committer is retired, they are automatically removed from the team. All designated contributors are automatically added to the contributors team and are granted triage level access to project resources hosted on GitHub. When an individual is added to the project's contributors list, they are automatically added to the contributors team. Likewise, when they are removed from the contributors list, they are automatically removed from the team. For information regarding the privileges available to each of the maintain, write, and triage roles, consult the GitHub documentation. Here's what the ECA validation looks like on a GitHub pull request. In this example, the author of the pull request does have a signed ECA on file, and as a committer, you can have confidence that the necessary rights are in place and accept the commit. The ECA can be signed after the fact. That is, you can resolve notification that the contributor hasn't signed the ECA by having the contributor sign the ECA. In the case where the contributor has used the wrong email address, the commits will have to be restaged by the contributor with the correct email address. Before you squash commits, make sure that the necessary ECAs are in place. Even if the tool says that everything is okay, if you feel that something is out of place or doesn't feel right, connect with the EMO to request assistance. One more thing. When your Eclipse project uses GitHub, be sure to tell contributors and committers to add their GitHub username to the Eclipse Foundation account so that our script can add them to the GitHub teams that we use to manage access to Eclipse Foundation repositories hosted on GitHub. Without this information, designated contributors and committers will have the corresponding status in name only. They won't be able to actually do anything. The project team can choose to designate specific individuals as official contributors. On GitLab, designated contributors are granted the reporter role in the project's repositories. On GitHub, designated contributors are granted the triage role. Designated contributors can do things like triage issues. For more information on specific privileges, check with the documentation for the target platform. Note that contributors can create merge and pull requests regardless of whether or not they are designated as an official contributor. Any committer or project lead can add or remove contributors for their own project using the PMI. The contributor must have an Eclipse Foundation account. And in the case of GitHub, the contributor must also provide their GitHub ID in their Eclipse Foundation account. To add or remove contributors, log into the PMI, navigate to your project's page, click Edit. Open the section labeled Source Code and Issues, then add and remove people to and from the Contributors field. There is Content Assist that will help you look up contributors by email address. As a committer, you are the first line of defense in our intellectual property due diligence process. We've provided some tools to help you determine whether or not the author has the necessary agreements in place, but are otherwise dependent on you to take steps to mitigate against risk associated with accepting intellectual property. We've determined that relatively small contributions come with relatively small risk. So any contribution made from a non-committer containing fewer than 1,000 lines of content doesn't automatically require a review. When a contribution contains more than 1,000 lines of content, a committer must present their content to the Eclipse Foundation's IP team for their review before it is merged into the project content. Engage the IP team to review content by creating a contribution questionnaire. We provide more information on this topic in a follow-up video. If something doesn't look right in the author information, or you have other concerns regarding the provenance, copyright, or license of a contribution, connect with the EMO intellectual property team at emo-ip-team@eclipse.org for assistance.